Hey there everyone, this is Chess Coach Aaron. How you doing? And I'm here for the third game out of 3 videos for the Greco Gambit. Some people also call it the Greco Attack because if black doesn't accept the Gambit, it could be the Greco Attack. But the Greco Gambit is what we've been looking at. Now usually I'll show one of my games just as an example. And I usually play every thing I talk about. I try them all. I love all the spicy gambits and I love the Greco Gambit. Once in a while, I'll show games from my students, of course. Love when the students send me games, show me what you've been doing, and that's wonderful. But once in a while, I also want to use games from the actual name of the people. What I mean by that is the Greco Gambit. Greco was an actual chess player in the 1600s, a long time ago. He's one of the earliest pioneers of using chess books and talking about opening moves and just writing stuff down and trying to help people get better, along with himself. And he developed this idea of the gambit in the center. So this opening, this exact line, is named after him. And here is actually one of his games. This is from 1620. That is exactly 400 years ago. Wow! That blows me away, to be honest, that I can look at this game and I could say this could be a game that I just played. I really, this is exactly the same lines we talk about now. So not only did he work on opening moves at the beginning of the game 400 years ago, but they still apply to today. And that is what makes it as amazing as anything. One more time, this is Greco himself, and this is from a 1620 chess game he played, and he was white. All right, let's get into some of these moves. The Greco Gambit, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Great start. Bishop c4, great start. And once black plays bishop c5, white has a lot of choices. We've talked about this. And one of the choices I'm saying to use or to try is the spicy c3 followed by d4. Hit that center with the pawns and try to take over the center. So small pawn move c3 supports large pawn move d4. And you're not guarding your e-pawn for the moment, which means when, and usually they play knight f6, so if, but when they play knight f6, you're going to offer perhaps your e-pawn. It's going to be sitting there for a while, not protected. And this becomes the idea of the Greco attack and Greco Gambit if black takes that pawn at some point. All right, let's see what the Greco player himself. For his day, he was one of the strongest players, so he definitely was considered to be a master back then. All right, so this is what his opponent played. He played d4. They took the pawn. And many times, like I've said, when you have a headache, and in this position, this e-pawn for black is very hard to deal with the two attackers. Not to mention, of course, the bishop's under fire. But when you have a headache in chess, if you could sometimes just trade it away, that ends up being what's played the most. So black just does a fair trade, pawn for pawn, but get rid of the headache. They don't have to protect it. But this does allow white to set up this really strong pawn duo, pawn center, right in the sweet center. So this is the whole crux of the Greco attack and Greco Gambit. Here, usually black will jump to the side, bishop b4 check. Greco played knight c3, and that allows the idea of the gambit where the pawn is not protected and black takes it. They take it as much as anything, of course, to break up that pawn duo in the center. That's just so strong for white. All right, so Greco played the move I love, and this is 400 years ago. He played a move I love, which is you're down a pawn, but you're getting this rook active, and now you have threats, so black doesn't have time to castle. Love it. And his opponent played knight takes c3. And I did talk about this in the last 2 videos, where bishop takes is probably a little bit safer. And white can really try to mix it up and keep the spiciness, the complications going by ignoring the fact that they gave up one piece and going forward. In many of these lines, it's all about can black play d5. We've talked about this a lot. Here, his opponent played knight takes c3, and this also happened in game 1 of the Greco Gambits of my videos with my student Asa. And this does allow, after the b-pawn captures back and you're attacking this bishop, this does allow white to get really good games. There's almost no way now, if you take with the knight first, there's almost no way for white not to have a good game. And by good game, I mean lots of pressure. White usually has much more fun here. Queen b3 ideas and bishop a3 along with bishop g5 and getting heavy stuff on the e-file. This is all just exactly what the Greco Gambit is about, and this is why white plays the Greco Gambit. All right, so his opponent in 1620 took this pawn, and it looks pretty good for a moment for black, attacking a rook, maybe controlling e1, and his bishop is very fast, right? So it could run back and help out maybe later in the game. So it seems to make sense, but this is just a little bit too much. White's pieces are a little too active. Here, Greco chose queen b3, which is exactly what my student Asa also played in the first video of the 3 I did. And this is fantastic. It might not even be the #1 move, but it's so strong. And it just feels so powerful to set up this battery aiming for the f-pawn along with attacking the bishop, and you already have this bishop that can go either way and help out, and this open e line. I mean, it just seems so strong. I mean, what's black to do, to be honest? Some of the other moves, of course, I talked about previously were bishop to a3. I think is the #1 move at the top level. Maybe it's the most precise, but queen b3, nothing wrong with that at all. I would play that every day and get this position every day if I could. Now Greco's opponent did something that we actually haven't talked about before, which is, we did talk about how this bishop, if it could, would run back to the king side and help defend the king side. One of the things that happens here in this opening and this idea is that this bishop is on this side of the d pawn, and it's on this side of, this side of the board for black. So it's actually not helping over here on the king side. So giving up the exchange, or even giving up the a-rook for a while totally, while white attacks somewhere over here, makes a lot of sense. This bishop is one of the few things developed for black, but it's on the other side of the d-pawn. It's on the other side of the situation. One of the things we haven't talked about, though, is when you play queen b3, that's one less defender of the d-pawn. Right now, the knight and the bishop are attacking, and right now there's 2 defenders. But when you play queen b3, making your own threats, battery f-pawn, attacking this bishop, suddenly this pawn is available to take. So, Greco's opponent did something interesting, which is they went back. They ignored the rook. They didn't keep the bishop along the diagonal guarding e1, but instead they took with the idea that this bishop could try to run back and maybe help out on the king side. But this is not quick enough, unfortunately. There's just too much here. But by taking this pawn, you also have to realize there's 7 pawns for black and only 4 for white. That's 3 pawns. Well, of course, white's going to get 1 back immediately, so it's really only 2 pawns. And black's going to lose casting, keeping the king in the center. So now it becomes 2 pawns for you having more active pieces and their king stuck in the center. Can you go get them? In this particular position, I think white still has a much better game. If you look at the computers, after bishop takes d4, they give, +8, +7, which is, the same as 2 or 3 pawn difference or 1 piece difference. So even though black is up 3 pawns, which means they should be up 3 points, the computer says they're actually down 7 or 8 points. That's how much of a difference all this activity is, and his king being stuck in the center. All right, so let's see what Greco did here. Bishop takes f8, makes sense. King slides over, and now we have a couple choices, a couple forks in the road, and this will be the last one to talk about, and I'll show the rest of the moves that Greco did, because Greco has a wonderful position here. But we have a couple forks in the road, and Greco played the very strong bishop g5. Why not? With this bishop, though, now black has a new opportunity to kind of block. If this pawn was in the way and this bishop was on c3, or let's say taking an a1, there is no running back to block. And right now this queen is in some serious trouble, right? The bishop's attacking it. There's nowhere safe for it to run. And this is very strong. This is one of several winning choices for white, to be honest. Probably actually not the strongest out of all these winning choices. Let's see some of the other choices, and then we'll see what happened here. And you can probably guess, of course, that his opponent ran back with the bishop. That would be the whole point of taking his pawn, so this bishop can defend on the king side. And here's a perfect moment to defend on the king side. All right, but what are some different choices here? Well, after taking his pawn, their bishop can run back. Your rook is still threatened, but you do have this now e1. It was on c3 guarding e1 maybe, and now rook to e1 is huge. So here is a really good move. Maybe just as good, if not better, than the actual threat right away of the queen, because you still can find a3 or g5 in a moment. great spots for this dark squared bishop. So what does rook e1 actually do? Well, you have a quick threat of, if you wanted, rook goes all the way down, winning the queen now. But as important as anything is you are now controlling, slicing that E line and totally controlling it with this strong rook. The idea in these positions with the Greco Gambit is many times you're going to run back with your bishop and have checkmating threats on f7. Many times your knight's going to help out and add to the pressure of a checkmate on f7. And when you're running back, by the way, to h5 with your light squared bishop, one of the things that occurs is it's very hard for black to play g6 because this bishop going to h6 check and your queen already controlling all these light squares and now this rook controlling all the e file, this makes it basically really hard for the black king to survive. So by running back and threatening checkmate, g6 is very difficult because bishop h6 is still going to be probably winning very quickly, shortly. And now the rook cuts off any ideas of the queen going to the E line to cover f7. And this is very important. So next move can be run back, threaten checkmate. And now it's very hard for this queen to go to e7. That's not a choice anymore to cover. The only other choices would be to f6, which creates other difficulties, such as if the bishop runs back and this queen goes to f6, well, you have checkmate down on e8. So the queen now, because you put the rook on e1, the queen now has to guard against a checkmate on the back rank, right? If the queen leaves, this is actually checkmate. Boom. I mean, just real quick, we can show it. Let's say they don't pay attention. It's checkmate right now, right? Boom. All right. But let's back it up. And so rook e1 is definitely a really good choice. The choice that I probably would play first is to first just do rook to h5 and threaten this checkmate immediately. Though having the rook on the e line is very pleasant because you take away options from this queen, right? It's got to guard e8 and it can't go to e7. And it can't leave and go to f6 to stop the checkmate again with the rook there. So that is one of the reasons why the rook there is great, I admit. But I would like to threaten checkmate first and see how black's going to reply. Again, if they go forward, bishop to h6 rather is just too strong. So if they play g6, bishop to h6 just seems to win right away, right? Let's see, queen f6, and now you play rook e1. And notice, because they've already moved the queen, and we said a moment ago, move here first, but now they're not going to move the queen. So in my mind, if you go bishop there and then they move the queen, rook e1 seems to be almost impossible to deal with. This threat of checkmate now just seems so strong. I mean, how is, again, black going to deal with this? g6 and bishop a6 is just way too strong. Too much going on here. And if they try to use the knight to block this line, right? Well, the knight's one of the things guarding the bishop. And the queen's got to stay stopping checkmate. It's got to guard f7 so the queen can't leave. Well, knight back, and you can snack on the bishop. You don't even necessarily need to snack on the bishop either. The knight could go back. You could just play bishop g5 probably, and that seems to be winning too. All right, so this is just too strong. So bishop h5 is really strong. Rook e1, really strong. And then the move that Greco himself played, bishop g5, really strong. They all seem to be winning, of course. It's just a matter of taste and which one might be clearly winning or, you know, the strongest move. If you have a forced checkmate, obviously you want to do the forced checkmate. I'm not saying bishop g5 isn't winning. It's definitely winning. All right, so bishop g5, and the opponent ran back with the bishop. Makes sense. That's why they would take that d pawn. And the final thing I just wanted to point out is, does it really make a difference to move the f rook over to the e line versus the a rook? No, probably not. And maybe it's better to do the f1 so your e rook has other choices just in case. You know, it's just nitpicking, of course. So he played rook a to e1. He got it away from this bishop, but this bishop's already doing work over here, and it's not capturing the rook. It could have captured the rook a long time ago, and it's not doing it. All right, so let's just finish up these moves, and not a whole lot of choices here, right? The rook coming down and bishop coming back. This just seems to be a winning threat. So he blocks the e line with a knight, and bishop came back, threatening checkmate. Notice how often these checkmate threats occur. And the queen cannot go to e8. The king can't run away. So he's got to deal with these threats right now. And he plugs up, you know, the bishop's support of f7. Plugs it up. Now, what about if he played g6? Well, again, in this position, this g pawn is the only thing protecting the bishop. So G6, take here, and yeah, this game is already over. You got too many threats going on. You still have the knight and checkmate threats later, just too much, so that doesn't help. So he played knight G6, but notice now, there's a pin of the knight because that's the checkmate. There's a pin of the bishop to the queen, and we have all the active firepower going on here. Not part of the game, not part of the game, not part of the game. So Greco played knight e5. He took advantage of not one, but two pins here, basically. The bishop's not going to take because of the queen, and black's got to be very careful if he moves this knight on g6 because of, again, the checkmate threats. And he did take the knight. There's really not a whole lot to do here. He could try to survive by taking over here, but he's losing a lot of pieces and a lot of position. And oh yeah, there's another checkmate threat over here with the knight as a supporter, so he's got to play d5. He can't play d6 because that would give up checkmate also. Oh my gosh. All right, so he took the knight, and for one moment this knight does stop the checkmate on f7, but after rook takes, basically this is really all she wrote. This is really it, guys. And how does black deal with this? He can't. So he plays g6, bishop h6, back it up. Another fantastic move by Greco here, which if you're doing your puzzles, you'll find moves like this. It's only going to happen when you play spicy positions and you have all kinds of powerful pieces. So again, the g-pawn is pinned. It shouldn't take because this bishop is aiming for f7. This bishop is pinned, so he can't come back to block. In check, where are you going to go? Can you go over here? No. And if you go this way, the other can participate if it wanted. Or one more time, we have, whoops, queen going to f7 checkmates. Now it's the rook that'll be supporting. So if the king moves to e8, it would be checkmate. King could go up, but you could just check here. I mean, this game is over. And instead, though, I guess his opponent didn't see it, and the game did end on move 19, queen f7 check. And it's amazing how many of these spicy e4, e5 openings, right? There's a lot of different gambits, but it's amazing how many in the end, even not a move 4 or 5, but much later in the game, ends up checkmate on f7. And here we are. It's move 19. Checkmate where? On f7. And not just f7, by the way. It happens to white when black plays very aggressive and spicy towards white, and white doesn't handle it properly, and they get checkmated on f2. It is amazing how often it does happen in these type of openings. Anyway, this was a magnificent game by Greco, and again, I can't keep saying just how much it's amazing to me. 1620, 400 years ago is when this game was played. This game could have been played today. So this opening still holds true 400 years later. All right, let's try to get one quick joke in, and we'll be done with this video. What do elves learn in school? You guys are students, and you guys know what subjects and what things you guys learn. Some of you do chess too, right? It's awesome. But what do elves learn in school? Oh, I think I have it. The alphabet. All right, guys, this is just Coach Aaron out. Hope you used a Greco Gambit. And who knows, maybe you'll play a game, Greco Gambit, and 400 years from now, another coach will be showing his students it. All right, be good. Have a great weekend.